Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Superman Red Sun. This is a collection of the 2003 miniseries published by DC Comics. It was one of their Elseworlds titles. Those are the DC Comics, which are like what if type comics, where they take their classic characters and put them in alternate settings, alternate realities, and such like that. Tagline kind of sums it up: the great American icon reimagined as a Soviet hero. This is written by Mark Millar, the English writer responsible for Ultimates and a big chunk of the Civil War from Marvel and Kick-Ass. That's probably his most well-known property. But this is one of the earliest things I read by him, and I kind of became a fan. It's just really fun, entertaining stuff. This is just a really interesting superhero comic. I probably own 15 Superman comics in my whole collection, but this one's a keeper. It's really, really well written and really fun. And I'm also a sucker for alternate history ever since I was a little kid. I love what-if stories. So I'm into it already. Covered by Dave Johnson here. Dave Johnson penciled the first two issues of this miniseries, and he was inked by Andrew Robinson. Killian Plunkett took over the third issue. I don't know what happened. Dave Johnson just couldn't finish it. And he was inked by Walden Wong. Kind of two different artistic styles, but they're both pretty damn nice. And I love this, how all the covers and some of the art inside of this comic, it's trying to replicate that Soviet propaganda art from the 30s and 40s. And he does a pretty good job. I mean, that's a sharp looking cover. There's the title page and credits. Paul Mounts is the colorist of this. Paul Mounts was one of the earliest painters in the 80s who brought a more painterly style to coloring. The paper was getting better, Baxter Comics, that kind of stuff, graphic novels. And he was one of the earliest guys who was doing just more than your average normal mainstream coloring. We have an introduction by Tom DeSanto. I think he's some kind of Hollywood movie producer. I'm sorry, I should go back here and show off some of that Soviet propaganda homages. I like this, how he totally draws it like a Max, old school Superman, like Max Fleischer cartoon era, Joe Shuster. Let our enemies beware, there's only one superpower now. Citizens, all hail our comrade of steel and the workers' utopia. Like Superman's dressed in these little farmer's breeches. And the first chapter is called Red Sun Rising. I gotta say that I love the brilliant pun of this title, because Superman was born under a red sun, but in this comic he's the red sun of communism. So it starts off in the 1950s. The narration, you can tell it's this red narration. It's Superman's future tense point of view, almost like an omniscient narrator, because he's reciting this from the future, so he knows everything that's going to happen. And he's reminiscing about when news of his coming out to the public, when news of that hit the world. And of course it hit the world like an atom bomb. So we see Louis Luthor. So Lois Lane has married Lex Luthor in this world. And she still works for the Daily Planet. Perry White, the editor-in-chief, calls her up and says, "Wake up. This is like the biggest news story of the century." And Eisenhower gets on TV and he tells the American people the bad news. We see Jimmy Olsen here. He's an FBI agent in this world. He seems a lot more competent than he does in the Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen comics. He's way more serious. America's kind of in a panic. There's all these sightings of Superman flying over America. And it's almost like when Sputnik was announced, America went into a panic because Russia was beating us in the space race. So this is like 1,000 times more scary, you know. Eisenhower's just like, we're fucked, basically. He's like, call up Lex Luthor at Star Labs. He's our only hope. So now we're introduced to Lex Luthor. And I like the way he writes Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is such a genius. He's like superhuman. We first meet him. He's playing chess with 4 different opponents using this kind of radio. It looks like a Walkman that he just invented that morning during his breakfast. And at the same time, he's teaching himself Urdu, the language. Because his brain is just like 50 times more developed than your average human. And he gets bored. So Jimmy Olsen comes to visit him and basically says, okay, you're working for the government now. This is a crisis. We see Lois and Lex at home, and basically we find out throughout this comic, like, Luthor just doesn't have a heart. I mean, he's too smart for everyone else. And he doesn't have room in his brain for like empathy or love. And treats Lois pretty shabbily. Never has time for her. So Lex comes up with a plan finally. He figures out what to do. So now we're back in Russia, and we see that this Superman is just like the Superman we know. Even though he works for Soviet Russia, and he's a, ardent communist. But just like Superman grew up in our capitalist society, it's not like he fights for capitalism. He just wants to do what's right and help people. So just like in the normal Superman comics we grew up reading, it's just he's all over the world saving whoever needs saving. He doesn't care if they're Russian or whatever country they're from. He's flying around all the time, saving people, rescuing people. He just wants to do what's right. So basically, Sputnik falls from the heavens and is heading right for Metropolis. Superman hears it with his super hearing. I like these kind of cartoony faces in the crowd. Dave Johnson can be very cartoony. I should have pointed out this panel. Sorry, by the way. I really like that. Superman stopping the train. That's very classic, cool superhero shit. So Superman grabs Sputnik, and it's a little tougher than he thought to change its course. So he kind of brushes up against the giant globe on top of the Daily Planet building. But he succeeds in dropping it out into the ocean so it can't hurt anyone. Because, I mean, that would have been like a meteorite hitting Earth. It would have killed like thousands of people, the shock waves and everything. So his super hearing hears that he fucked up the globe on the Daily Planet building. It's falling off its moorings, and it's flying down towards Earth, falling to Earth, and it's going to kill a bunch of people. And Superman saves the day. Look at that. Speaking of classic superhero shit, that's a nice drawing. That's fun stuff. And one of the people he saved is Lois Luthor. And just like in our dimension, or the DC dimension, they just, it's a love that transcends all realities and universes. Instantly their eyes lock. I like how Superman's kind of cocky. He's basically like, yeah, I know she feels it too. Well, he does know, because he can, the increase in her pulse rate to the micron of extra perspiration on her skin, he can sense that. But neither of them can act on the impulse. Superman's, just like in the DC reality, this Superman is very pure-hearted, and he's not going to mess with a married woman. And Lois is the same way. Even though she should cheat on Luthor, because he sucks as a husband. So this was all Luthor's plan. He's the one who knocked Sputnik out of orbit because he wanted to get any biological tissue that Superman would leave behind on Sputnik. So they dredge it out of the water, the government does, and he's going to use that biological matter to make his own Superman. We're at a big parade honoring Superman in Moscow. And this kind of reminds me of the Samaritan character in Kurt Busiek's Astro City, where Superman can never do anything for more than 5 minutes. He's always hearing, oh, there's a volcano in Tahiti. I better go and rescue him. And Stalin basically calls him a hyperactive child. He's like, it's like hanging out with a spastic kid. He won't sit still. And now we're introduced to Joseph Stalin's bastard son, Pyotr. I'm probably ruining that pronunciation, Pyotr. And we realize Pyotr does not like Superman. He thought he was being groomed to take over after Stalin died, to run Russia. But of course now, that would be ridiculous. Everyone wants Superman to take over. He's saved communism, saved Russia. So yeah, Pyotr does not like Superman at all. So we see some state dinner in Moscow. Joseph Stalin is escorting Hippolyta from Themyscira around, Wonder Woman's mother. I like this. He even tries to hit on her. He's like, why don't you join me up at the presidential suite? And she says, please don't embarrass yourself, Joseph. Maybe if you were 5,000 years older. I thought that was cute. And meanwhile, Superman and Diana / Wonder Woman, they're getting along like a house on fire. They just have this instant sense of camaraderie. Of course, they're the only people on Earth who they can relate to. So Diana's thrilled. She's like, oh, it's so exciting to meet someone like me, finally. But it does seem, at least from Superman's point of view, that it's just, he likes her as a pal. I think his heart is already won over by Lois. Just one look. And not that he has time for any romance in any way. He's constantly trying to save the world and rescue people. So Superman realizes that Pyotr is missing. And he's kind of worried about him because he kind of knows that Pyotr doesn't like him. He's concerned. So he finds Pyotr all drunk, shooting at the Scarecrow with a gun. And they basically have a heart-to-heart. And Pyotr does not pull punches. He's basically going on about, it's like, you know, I fucking hate you, basically. He's not really hiding it. But it's not just jealousy. I'm sorry about that. He's thinking about all of humanity. He's like, no matter what we do as human beings, no matter what accomplishments we do, we'll always be overshadowed by you. You basically cheapened the whole human race, or made us less than, you know? And so Pyotr tells him a story. He's in charge of the secret police in Moscow. He tells him about how the other night there was a purge, like last week or something. 2 dissidents were printing anti-Superman Day leaflets, and Pyotr shot him dead right in front of their son. And he says, all I remember is the boy, because this young boy looks at Pyotr with a look that is not like normal for a little kid. This look of laser intense hatred just focused on him. And it kind of pisses him off. So he says, get out of my sight. Your parents are dead. And as he's walking away, he even shoots him in the shoulder. He says, don't walk, run. His glare would have stopped a clock ticking. Somebody said he threw himself in the Moscow River. Others said he disappeared into the sewers to lick his wounds and swear revenge. And we find out that Pyotr, even though he's capable of all this horrible stuff, but he does have some humanity, and he cries. He doesn't like the man he's become. I mean, he's pretty evil, but deep down he doesn't like it. And he tells Superman that he's sick of getting his hands dirty for a man who won't even admit he's his flesh and blood. So definitely has daddy issues. Oh, by the way, as if you didn't guess where this was heading, we see the sewers. There's all these bats around that little kid. And Pieter aims the gun at his own temple and fires. But when Superman's around, he can't get away with that shit. With his super speed, he stops the bullet. And that makes Pieter even angrier. He's like, God damn it. We don't even have a choice anymore, you know? He tells Superman, see, his fear and hatred of him is beyond just being jealous. He says, your interference is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity. You mark my words. There's a little foreshadowing there. So, Joseph Stalin is poisoned. Superman can't do anything. He tries to figure something out, but it's too late. Pieter runs into the room, and you realize he loved his dad a lot. And it's very sad. He found the guy who poisoned him and shot him in front of everyone in Red Square a few weeks later. So now we're back with Lex Luthor and government liaison for the Superman project, Jimmy Olsen. He's moving up in the world. And he shows them what he created from the biological residue left by Superman. Superman 2. And we realize this is Bizarro. They give him a kind of different face, but this is the Bizarro Superman in this reality. Meanwhile, everyone's exhorting Superman to take over the Soviet Union. And, you know, he's so pure-hearted, he's just so like, that's crazy. That goes against the very idea of, you know, of communism, which celebrates the common man. The fact that I'm this super being with extraordinary powers, that I would lead you, that goes against everything, you know, Karl Marx wanted, and Lenin and Stalin. So he refuses. Meanwhile, there's this American sub. They even call it this stupid Bizarro thing. So it's not officially named Bizarro, but we all know he's Bizarro. So they're like kind of escorting Bizarro, and he confronts Superman. They start fighting, have a big slugfest. And pretty soon we realize he's a pretty cheap imitation of Superman. Superman makes relatively short work of him. Yeah, and I guess the American soldiers, one of them panics or something. Maybe they think that they're under attack now. So they launch a missile. But I think it goes wild because it appears that the missile heads straight for London. And Superman's too late to save all the innocent bystanders. Usually he's there in time, but he gets there just in time to see, you know, hundreds of people killed. And then Bizarro shows up. And Superman says, this country doesn't need American protection. The Soviet Union poses no threat to the future of Great Britain. And he proceeds to pummel him some more. And then another missile got launched. And then Bizarro does something unexpected. I guess he has enough of Superman in him that deep down he just wants to do the right thing and save people's lives. He's not so just a pawn of the U.S. government. So he freezes Superman with, I guess that's what he has instead of a heat vision. And he flies off, grabs the missile. I like this. His last words are, hello, everybody. Me very pleased to meet you. You know, talking like how Bizarro talks. He flies the rocket out into space where it just kills him. He sacrifices himself for everyone in London. So now we're back in Moscow. It's Joseph Stalin's funeral. And Superman notices in the crowd his childhood sweetheart. Basically, this is Lana Lang, you know, Lana Langovich or something. And once again, Superman's talking about how he doesn't want to take over. He doesn't really give a shit about politics. Just wants to help people. Back in Metropolis, we see Lois, and we realize that all this time, I think it's been years since they first met, she's been pining for Superman. I kind of like this corny old business of Superman's face in the clouds. It's like something from an old cartoon. Luthor's on the phone with Lois, and we realize that he's gotten way too much power. He's gone around the bend. It looks like he just murdered some of his assistants, probably for just fucking up a decimal point or something. Who knows why? But the fact is that he's untouchable because he's America's only hope to fight Superman. So the power's gone to his head, and he just has his own little rogue operation going on where he can do anything. So Superman catches up with Lana Langovich, and she's telling him how there's not enough food for all the people visiting Moscow for Stalin's funeral. And people are waiting in line for hours, and they're hungry. And Superman realizes, he's like, this is not right. If I took over, I could solve this. I could take care of all these problems. So I will take over Russia. He says Superman is here to rescue everyone, basically. Another nice little Superman pose. Paul Mounts always did this kind of stuff. Using that almost like, I don't even know if there's photos, but it would almost look like photorealistic colors for clouds and things like that. He's a lot more subtle about it in the early 2000s than he was in the 80s and 90s. Sometimes there's a little garish. I do love this design of communist Superman, that deep dark blue. It's pretty clever. So that's the end of chapter 1. Superman, Red Sun Ascendant, chapter 2. Another really nice cover from Johnson. Very, very stylized, graphic designy. Dave Johnson, we haven't really talked about on the channel before, but he's one of those guys who did a few comics and they were so loved that now he never does comics anymore. He just does covers. I mean, he's famous for his covers. He did all the covers for 100 Bullets and a bunch of other series. Great design sense. Almost all of his covers look like cool little movie posters. But as far as doing actual sequential narrative comic book storytelling anymore, I don't think he's done a comic in a long time. He doesn't have to. He's getting rich just from doing paintings. So years have passed, and Luthor has teamed up with Brainiac. This universe has a Brainiac too. Brainiac is the alien robot intelligence that is always fucking with Superman. So Brainiac has shrunken the city of Stalingrad and put it in this little bottle, just like the bottle city of Kandor in normal DC Comics, which Brainiac was responsible for. So Superman flies up to Brainiac's, mothership or whatever he calls this thing, and he just rips the CPU right out of it and neutralizes Brainiac as a menace. But, it is a defeat for Superman because he never figures out how to enlarge the city again. So basically everyone in Stalingrad is trapped in this little bottle for forever. We see another sign that Luthor's getting even more inhuman. Whenever the chess players who play against him lose now, he kills them. He zaps them with electricity. I like this little headline here. Kennedy grants Georgia independence. So America's not doing good. America is like a third world country now at this point. And we see Moscow, we see this docent. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Lana Langovich. She's become, Superman got her a job being a docent at the Superman Museum. And I like this wing of the museum where it's all of the villains that Luthor has created over the years to fight Superman. Superman has, pretty easily dispatched all of them. We see Parasite, Chemo. Oh, look, there's even a communist Crypto the dog. So we find out through her dialogue that at this point, basically, the United States and for some reason Chile are the only countries in the whole world that haven't fallen under the Warsaw Pact. Every other country has happily joined the Warsaw Pact because, with Superman leading them, everything's doing great. There's no poverty. There's no hunger. There's no crime. It's this utopia. But of course, there's always a price to pay for utopia. And we see one of the guards at the museum has got this thing on his head. And that is like for dissidents. If you're against the Soviet Union, they kind of lobotomize you with this little implant and turn you into a good citizen. We see this mysterious figure walk into the museum. And then he walks back out. And you can probably already tell who this is. He's obviously in some kind of resistance. And he sees this soldier kind of fuming about the government and how he almost wants to join the rebellion, I think I might have skipped a page. Nope. So, of course, we realize it's Batman Cough. We get a little glimpse of him. And in this world, he's kind of like V for Vendetta. He's just like a terrorist who's against just wants to bring the whole system down. So the whole army mobilizes, try to get Batman Cough. He's been doing this for years, so he's like public enemy number one, but he always eludes the Soviet army and Superman even. He's like the only one who's ever been able to stymie Superman. And of course, this Batman is just as formidable as the one we know. And he's eluding like all these helicopters and our soldiers, and they just can't get him. And I love this, our first full view of him. He's got that like fuzzy Russian hat. That's part of his design. Hey, in the notes, Dave Johnson mentions that people gave him shit about that hat. And he's like, Moscow's cold. Why shouldn't Batman's head be warm? What kind of... You wouldn't just want spandex, But I love this design. This super tough-looking Batman. Commie Batman. Well, anti-commie Batman. Yeah, there's some nice deep blue colors here. So then Pieter, he comes into Superman's office in the presidential suite. And I don't get this part of the comic at all. Superman apparently the past hour has been doing this sculpture. They've already set up that Superman constantly is flying around the world anytime a superhero hears of someone in distress. And yet in his own city where he lives, Moscow, this whole attack by Batman happened. He blew up 6 buildings. The cops were trying to get him and failing. And Peter's like, what the hell are you doing? How come, you didn't lift a finger to help get Batman? And he totally made monkeys out of us. He doesn't really have a good answer. And then, of course, he's got to fly off because there's a train disaster about to happen, and he saves the day once again. Now we cut away to Themyscira, and we see Diana again. She's a little older. And Themyscira is part of the Warsaw Pact. So the past few years, Wonder Woman has been Superman's partner. fighting anyone who would go up against the Soviet bloc. And we realize from their dialogue that all this time, Diana's totally in love with Superman, and he's completely oblivious. I think even if he wasn't oblivious, his heart belongs to Lois, even though he can't have her. He's a one-woman man. So now we see Perry White's retirement party from the Daily Planet, and we see Oliver Queen. I guess in this world, he's a reporter. And it looks like Lois Lane's going to take over as editor-in-chief after Perry retires. He gives her some advice, the bulk of which is like, your husband sucks. You got to get rid of that guy. He's the worst husband ever. And that now we see an example of it. LexCorp Industries. And I guess this once a year, she gets to spend the night with her husband on their anniversary. And of course, he's just so like, I didn't have time to buy you anything. I was reading 13 fascinating books this morning. Leave the usual present on my desk, and you have my word that one of my assistants can open it later, sweetheart. So it's just like, completely doesn't have a heart at all. And then he tells her that, like, oh, by the way, JFK and Norma Jean are going to join us for dinner tonight. And she's like, it's our anniversary. But he tells her some news, a major development, is that apparently Superman and Brainiac aren't the only aliens who've landed on Earth. Apparently in 1947, a starship landed in America, was taken to Roswell, and all this time, the starcraft has been locked up in Roswell, New Mexico. So back in Moscow, Batman kidnaps Piotr and takes him to his Bat Cave, which is, I guess in this world, it's the sewer cave. He lives in the sewers. And when he wakes up, Batman's there in his full costume. I like this, how Batman's cave is filled with all this detritus of American capitalism. We see a knockoff of Bob's Big Boy statue, a torn American flag, a theater marquee, a giant bowling pin from a bowling alley, and just an interesting little touch. So even though Piotr is the man, he's basically Batman's Joe Chill in this world. He killed his parents right in front of him, but they decide to make a pact because Superman is so unstoppable. Bruce Wayneovich basically said, or Batman Cough says, I know you hate Superman, and obviously I do too. But don't kid yourself. As soon as we get rid of Superman and you become the new premier, I'm going to come after you fucking hard every day. I'm going to take you down. I'd rather take you down than Superman, so that's why I'm helping you. We'll get rid of Superman, but then I'm still taking down the system, and it'll be a lot easier to take down without Superman around. So now we see some like fancy banquet in Moscow. We see Dr. Savannah from Captain Marvel comics, the villain. He in this reality, he works for the Soviets. Hippolyte is there again. Lana Langovich is there. And so there's this Dr. Savannah has come up with this elaborate fireworks thing to celebrate Superman's birthday or something. But Batman, with his genius, re-rigged it. And when the fireworks go off, it makes a bat. And Batman has Diana captive. Tied her up with her own magic lasso somehow. So Superman flies over to this rooftop. With his X-ray vision, he sees that Batman has a bomb set up to his heart. And then Batman flicks this switch, and all of a sudden these red lamps go on. And Batman slugs him. And Superman's like, good God, how did you do that? How did you get so strong? Of course, we know, as superhero geeks, Batman isn't that strong. Those are red sun lamps. So Superman has no powers. And Batman proceeds to whomp his ass. Superman tries to fight back, but Batman totally beats the shit out of him. And then he throws him into this underground bunker. See, Batman's not a killer. He just wants to get Superman off the chessboard. So this underground bunker has food for decades, but it's got red sun lamps constantly glowing. So he figures Superman will just live down here forever until he dies. And he'll stop meddling with Earth, But, both Wonder Woman and Superman have super hearing. So he tells Diana, he's like, Diana, there's only one hope. You've got to break through your magic lasso. And Diana's like, I don't know if I can do that. And he's like, I know it'll hurt, but you have to knock out the power source for these red sun lamps. Because I guess Diana has a kind of a connection to her magic lasso. So this is asking for a lot. And he's just telling her, he's like, please, I beg you, my old friend, do whatever it takes. You have to do this, or all is lost. So Diana does, because she loves Superman. She'll do anything for him. And she knocks out the power. Superman comes flying out of the bunker, fully revitalized. And Batman's like, I'm not going to fucking get one of those lobotomy implants on my skull. I'd rather die. And he blows himself up with his little bomb in his chest. And Diana flies down. And she says, it was like, I don't know, something just kind of switched off in my head or something. And look at her. She's fucked up. Her hair's all gray. It really messes her up. Oh, and I should say, before Batman killed himself, he let Superman know that it was Pietr's plan. So now we're back in America. We're at Roswell. JFK is showing Lex Luthor around. We see JFK here. He's all paunchy and old. So I think this is well into the 70s. So JFK is still president. And this is the starship that they find. Look familiar? Yeah. The U.S.S.R was in that ship in 1947, crash landed. And all this time, they haven't been able to figure out what this lamp does and what this ring does. And Luthor's just like, God, you people are so stupid. It's a fucking weapon, you morons. He figures it out in 1 second. There's the body of U.S.S.R. So now we're back in Russia. And Superman is, thinking to himself, just like, I offered these people utopia, but they fight for the right to live in hell. Because apparently Batman's death has inspired a lot of people to become like Batman wannabes and fight the system. We see that Diana has been basically she's messed up. Superman is taking care of her in Moscow and looking after her, but she's kind of catatonic, it looks like. Lana Langovich comes in, and we see that the person who's like waiting on Diana, it's Pieter. And Pieter's got the lobotomy thing. So he's a good citizen now. And he tells her about how Superman is building a fortress, the Fortress of Solitude, which they don't call it that, but another nice, very striking cover. Really nice graphic design. That's by Dave Johnson, but the insides of this third issue, this is when Killian Plunkett and Walden Wong take over. Walden Wong on inks. So this is Red Sun Setting, the final chapter. So once again, time has passed. The world is pretty much a utopia except for America. There's no hunger, no poverty. Superman just really clean things up. Of course, as we know, there's a price to that. Because he grew up in Soviet Russia where it's like, okay, yeah, we want to take care of everyone. It doesn't matter if we have to violently suppress people who go against us. He thinks it's worth it. So his Fortress of Solitude, he's got he's now basically his main assistant is a reprogrammed Brainiac robot. He's also got all these Batman guys. He's got them lobotomized, and they're his little servants mopping up and shit. So that's kind of twisted. So Brainiac is basically trying to convince him, like, you've got to take over America. America's a shit show. And Superman's like, no, we've never done that. The whole world has come into the Warsaw Pact voluntarily. They just liked what they saw, what we were doing, and they voted to join. I don't want to, conquer a country and force them to be part of us. This is a kind of fun little homage. They're showing how shitty things are in America. Like, it's riots, people starving, and this little homage to Superman #1. These people are overturning the car, and that guy from the cover is running away. So meanwhile, Lex Luthor has been voted in as president of the United States with Vice President Jimmy Olsen helping him out. And within like 6 months, using his super brain, for 30 years, all he's used his brain for was trying to kill Superman. But now that he actually just focuses on taking care of America, within 6 months, the economy's doing amazing. All the states that succeeded are back in the Union. Everything's great. He's turned America into an economic powerhouse in 6 months. Because that's how smart he is. But he admits that he couldn't stand the people. He wasn't doing it for the people. This was all part of an elaborate plan, his lifelong thing to get rid of Superman. We see Lois having a little argument with her sister. I don't know if you used to read those old Lois Lane comics, but her sister's terrible. She's a terrible person who's so sadistic to poor Jimmy Olsen. So Luthor finally steps up the plan and initiates it. And now we're going to see what he did with the alien technology in Roswell. And we meet Hal Jordan, test pilot, who's going to be the first one to bear the ring. Because Luthor figured out that they need someone with incredible willpower and very brave. I love this little side story showing how they found Hal Jordan. This is how Lex Luthor knew that this was the right guy for the project. He was shot down in Malaysia in 1983. I guess America had a little war going on then. And, he was a pilot, and he was put in a POW camp. For years, for 4 years, he was stuck in this cage. And thanks to his willpower, that's the only way he survived the psychological torture. And basically, he built a virtual concentration camp in his head for the communists who were persecuting him. He spent 3 weeks composing a design, and then after selecting precisely the right spot in his old hometown, started building the place in real time. If it took 3 days to dig the foundations, he would spend 3 days imagining every single step. So can you imagine that for 4 years, he just methodically planned this concentration camp in his mind, and just the willpower of it. But that's what kept him sane from snapping. Back in Themyscira, we see Lois as the first lady visiting Diana. And she basically says, Diana, we're going after Superman. Are you with us? And 5 years before, Diana wouldn't have thought of it, but now she's like, yeah, I'll help you. Definitely not a fan of Superman anymore. So we see Stalingrad, and this horrible disaster has happened. It looked like this giant monster has attacked the city, killed like thousands of people, demolished millions of dollars worth of property. It turns out it's just a flea, because remember, this is Stalingrad, the shrunken city in the bottle. And all the citizens are talking to Superman through this hologram, and they're like, how could you let this happen? You're supposed to be, there to protect us. And Superman's profusely apologized. He's like, I'm sorry, I've been so distracted. I should have checked the air vents on your city. This flea got through. I'm so sorry. So, Superman's got a little too much on his plate. He's running the whole world. And he's got to deal with all this rebellion and stuff. So Brainiac is basically exhorting Superman to just take over America. Enough of this shit. Because Luthor's making America strong again. There might not be another chance in even a year or so. And then all of a sudden Luthor pops up inside the Fortress of Solitude. And meanwhile, the Green Lantern Corps is amassing their forces. So I guess they found all these other guys and gave them duplicate rings. So there's like 100 guys who are ready to attack Luthor. I'm sorry, Superman. Luthor tells Superman, I came here to fight you on my own terms. Are you ready to lock horns with the most dangerous mind in the world? And then all of a sudden, these robotic tentacles come out of the wall. It's Brainiac. And Superman's not happy. He's like, what the hell are you doing? And Brainiac says, I couldn't allow him to debate with you, Superman. Entering a conversation with a level 9 intelligence is more dangerous than any death trap. He would have talked you into committing suicide within 14 minutes. My calculations have figured it out. So Superman kind of says, okay, Brainiac, you win. And the Green Lantern Corps attacks Superman. They're pretty much no match for him. I mean, they kind of got him on the ropes for a second, but Superman's way too strong for him. I really like this design for Hal Jordan. It looks pretty kick-ass. So he neutralizes that threat, and then the Themyscirians show up with Wonder Woman leading them. And they're all going to go against Superman. And once again, Superman makes short work of them. He even blinds Diana with his heat vision. And he seems pretty unrepentant. Like, he's definitely changed. He's become a hard man. He says, why are you siding with them like this, Diana? I'm trying to save the world, you idiot. After blinding her, it's like no sympathy at all. And then they unleash all of the villains. We see Doomsday. These are the villains that Luthor has been developing over the years. And so now Brainiac and Superman are in Washington, D.C. Superman wants everyone to evacuate the White House before he destroys it. He's still, basically a good guy. But Lois Lane refuses to leave. I'm sorry, Lois Luthor. She says, this is my home. I'm not budging an inch. And Superman says, America's finished. You don't have anything left to hit me with. And Lois says, actually, we still have one shell left in our arsenal. Take a look at the letter in my inside pocket. And Superman looks at it with his X-ray vision. And we see his eyes well up with tears. And he collapses to the ground, completely broken. And he says, oh my God, what have I done? All I wanted was to put an end to the wars and famines. You've got to believe me. And Lois says, what the hell was in this letter? And all it says is, why don't you just put the whole world in a bottle, Superman? And then Brainiac shows up. And, Superman says, call it all off. We're going home. And Brainiac says, no, we're not. So Brainiac basically reveals that all this time he's been not the supplicant of Superman. He's been plotting this for years, decades. He says to Superman, did you really think you could reprogram me? A level 12 intelligence. Did you really think I couldn't outmaneuver those clumsy human fingers? And he starts attacking Superman. So once again, Superman just flies up to Brainiac's ship and rips his little CPU skull out. But Brainiac left a fail-safe bomb in there. It says 1 minute to detonation. And this is a big bomb. This is going to take out like millions of people. So Superman does what Bizarro did earlier. He grabs the craft and flies out into space. I like this. He says, Lex, I know you're not going to hear this message for a while or even see the explosion until the light reaches you. But there's something I have to say before I go. Well played, old friend. And he has a smile on his face. I just like that because, these guys have been fighting each other for decades. But they've both, the whole time, each of them has admired the shit out of the other one, their opponents. And kind of shows that. Nice little bit of character there. Characterization, I should say. So Luthor's like, Superman's gone, Brainiac's gone. The world is ready to embrace Lutherism. Doesn't sound good. One could almost be forgiven for thinking that this had all been worked out to the 10th decimal point 40 years ago. So supposedly, Luthor's so smart that every little step in this 4-decade journey, he's been planning for this. And he says, checkmate, Superman. So now we see what happens. Luthor basically becomes president of the world. He somehow wins 101% of the vote. So I guess not everything's on the up and up. So pretty much 6 months later, Russia fell. Luthor started running their economy, and everyone in the world signs up to the global United States. And I guess after defeating Superman, he realizes, like, I don't have to be so evil. Why don't I? It might be a fun exercise just to try to make my own utopia. So within a few years, cancer's gone, AIDS is gone, inherited diseases have been cured. His 75th birthday, Luthor retires all the politicians and creates a one-world government composed of artists, writers, and philosophers. I like this. We see this beatnik dude here. I think he's from an old DC comic, one of those Monsploitation comics they used to do. And they just follow through the ages because of his scientific advances. People are now living to be like 400 years old. So now it's like, God, like 2,000 years later, Luthor's in his cryogenic chamber. I guess he wakes up every few hundred years. And when the reporters ask him what he's most proud of, he says, defeating the alien, my boy. What in the world could possibly compare with saving my people from Superman? And Lex Luthor dies. Of course, there's a huge funeral. It's the biggest event. And there's a guy in the crowd. And it's Clark Kent. And Clark Kentovich. I don't know what his name is. And Lois kind of almost senses. She's like, oh, I have a sense of deja vu. But she doesn't see him. And in his narration, Clark talks about how, he's had a change of heart. He realizes that the human race didn't necessarily need him. It could thrive without him. He always thought that he had to save the human race. And I guess the past thousands of years, he's just been watching and happily seeing that the world does just fine without him being Superman. And then we go even further in the future. We hear a list of all of Lex Luthor's descendants, great artists and mathematicians and necronauts who set foot in the afterlife. And so they start, the name changes a little. Alex L., Jordan L., Lana L., and of course, Lex Luthor's great-grandson to the power 50, a young man named Jor-El. But he'd been acting strange lately, working too hard and telling the world that our bright red sun was going to swallow the earth. And we see Kal-El return to his quarters and to his beautiful wife. And look, he's wearing exactly what Kal-El used to wear in the old Superman comics. And of course, he's railing against these oversatisfied fools on the Science Council. And he showed them evidence that we're all doomed, and they just were like, you're arrogant. So he's going to put his baby in this little ship to save him. There's only room for one little baby. But this ship doesn't go through space. It travels through time. So he sends it back thousands of years to back when the Earth's sun was yellow. So he tells his wife, he'll be okay. He'll be virtually indestructible. He'll be strong and fast. He'll be able to take care of himself, basically. And they send him off just as the planet is consumed by the sun. Goodbye, my son. Go back and change the world so that we might not become this cold, complacent lot. So then we see the Ukraine, 1938. And we see a spaceship crash land. And this couple find it. The end. What a twist. I know that's been used so many times before, the whole time loop thing, but I think that was pretty clever. I definitely didn't see it coming. I almost found it unnecessary, though. Like, it was a pretty satisfying ending, just seeing this, like, wow, so Luthor made this utopia after all. And we don't need Superman. But then there's just almost like an extra fun teaser at the end, they should have had a question mark after the end. The end? Overall, though, I love that story. I haven't read it in I think I first read it 10 years ago. I gotta say, I had such a good time reading it again last night. So that's why I'm holding on to this comic. I don't have many Superman comics, like I said. But I think this one's a keeper. And the art's pretty damn nice, too. Pretty good superhero art. This is nice. We get a little Dave Johnson sketchbook. We see all his character designs as he worked on how to draw this communist Superman. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't put this page in view. This would have been his design for the third issue had he drawn it. The elderly Superman. Some sketches. Batman cough. There's that note by Dave Johnson I told you about. I think that looks super cool. Maybe it's because I'm the kind of dork who wears one of those hats. The Confederacy of Dunce's hat or whatever it's called. This is kind of nice getting to see this unused cover design. which this would have been a pretty cool cover. It's just a really striking image. But I guess for some reason, he went with something else. And now we see Killian Plunkett's designs. Green Lantern. I think this Green Lantern looks pretty kick-ass. Just wearing like a pilot's gear. The old Superman as Killian Plunkett saw him. And that's it for Red Sun. Hope you enjoyed it. Just like I said, I love what if stuff. I love alternate history, but also I love a good superhero comic every now and then. And this is a damn good one. It's fun as hell. Got tons of cool, kick-ass action, but it's also got all this interesting, political stuff, philosophical shit. Like, it's interesting because Mark Millar's parents were socialists. I read this in an interview. So, in England, it's not like this fringe little party. The socialists were actually kind of a big party. So it's not seen as that weird, your parents are socialists. So I love how he does this, like any other writer, say an American writer, especially back in the 50s or 60s or 70s, would have been like, oh my God, if Superman grew up in Soviet Russia, he'd be this monstrous evil. And Mark was like, no, he'd definitely have to ignore some things about Soviet Russia and Stalinism. But for the most part, he still grew up like a good guy who wanted to help people. He just, he was out on a farm somewhere. He didn't know that Stalin was murdering millions of people. So just like we don't grow up hearing that we murdered millions of Native Americans or, enslaved millions of people. We still think like America's like the good guy. We used to always think that, growing up. So it's just a different perspective. Makes you think about stuff. It's pretty interesting. And damn, that's a nice cover. I'll say it again. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. And I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.